the mecca of coasters. A place like no other. The roller coast, Cedar Point. This summer, we finally made a return trip to Cedar Point. If you've seen the Cedar Point park review from last summer, you'll know that we didn't have the greatest experience there. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it in the card above. In 2020, we went to Cedar Point for 2 days on its opening weekend in July, which was delayed because of COVID. Needless to say, the park was packed, and most of the coasters were running at only half capacity, so the lines were pretty insane. We ended up only riding half of the roller coasters there. I got 9 of the credits there, but I was still missing rides on 8 of Cedar Point's legendary coasters. Fast forward to 2021, and we came prepared with our Fastlane Plus Skip the Line passes, fully vaccinated, fully caffeinated, and fully committed to getting all the credits at the roller coast. Well, long story short, we were able to get the job done, and now I've finally been on all the coasters possible at Cedar Point. So you know what that means. It's time to rank all 17 coasters at Cedar Point on Coaster Jawn. Let me preface by saying how happy I am that we can finally do this list. It's been a long time coming because Cedar Point is such an amazing park with arguably the greatest collection of roller coasters in the world. That being said, lots of people flock here, so if you want to have the best day possible and knock out all the coasters in one day, I highly recommend investing in a Fastlane Plus. With that out of the way, let's get into our list. Number 17, Wilderness Run, built by Intamin in 1979. An Intamin kiddie coaster? I bet you never thought you would hear that. Odd but true, Intamin's first ever coaster was this quaint little kids ride. Unfortunately, since my group was not accompanied by a child, we were not able to ride this, but it's just a kiddie coaster, so it's not the end of the world. I've never ridden this model of coaster, but by the looks of its classic trains and longer than usual layout, I think it would actually be a pretty solid kiddie coaster, which I would likely give a 1.5 out of 10. Next, number 16, Woodstock Express, built by Vekoma in 1999. Another kiddie coaster rounds out the bottom of this list. Cedar Point has a solid kids section towards the back of the park called Camp Snoopy, and this is the star attraction of that area. Woodstock Express is a Vekoma Junior coaster.
Junior?
Which is probably one of the most common kiddie coaster models out there. Even the likes of Disney and Universal have multiple of these coasters, like Barnstormer at Magic Kingdom or Woody Woodpecker at Universal Studios Florida. It's not the worst model I've ever ridden, giving decent whip and laterals, but it's still just a kiddie coaster, so it only garners a 2 out of 10. Number 15, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, built by Aerodynamics in 1969. One of the oldest coasters at Cedar Point, this Aero mine train is perfect for the whole family and fits right into the Frontier Town section of the park. I finally got this credit in 2021, and even though it was one of the longer lines of the day, it was still very worth it. This ride has a smooth, lengthy layout with some fun helixes and interactions with the water, but other than that, it's a pretty tame family coaster and doesn't really match up to most of the other coasters at Cedar Point. So it earns a 4 out of 10 for its family appeal and classic feel.
How about I just go eat some hay? I can make things out of clay and lay by the bay. I just may. What do you say?
Number 14, Iron Dragon, built by Aerodynamics in 1987. Another Aero family coaster, Iron Dragon is a very fun, albeit smaller scale, suspended coaster. Suspended coasters have trains which hang down from the track above and swing back and forth throughout their layouts. Even though Iron Dragon has some fun swinging and laterals, as well as a nice setting over the water, it still lacks a lot of the intensity that other suspended coasters have, like the Bat at Kings Island. Iron Dragon unfortunately also has 2 lift hills, which means that the first half has a lot of meaningless meandering around, which I found pretty boring. The second half is pretty fun though, but like I said, it is a pretty short layout overall. Iron Dragon gets a score of 6 out of 10 for being a fun ride for thrill seekers young and old, but it is a bit outdated and dwarfed by the other massive thrill machines at the park. Number 13, Corkscrew, built by Aerodynamics in 1976. Yet another Aero coaster at Cedar Point, Corkscrew is truly one of the classics. Corkscrew was the first roller coaster to ever feature 3 inversions. While those inversions are very fun and give no headbanging at all, that's pretty much all this ride does. After the straight first drop, Corkscrew goes into a vertical loop, straight track, and then turns around into the ride's signature elements, the double corkscrews. After that is another straight section and then a very drawn out brake run. So like I said, all this ride is good for is its 3 inversions and doesn't do much else. Corkscrew is short but sweet, which also gives it a 6 out of 10 and gets the edge over Iron Dragon for its history and photogenic interaction with the Midway. Number 12, Wicked Twister, built by Intamin in 2002. This Intamin Impulse shuttle launch coaster is the tallest of its kind at 215 feet tall, and also features 2 twisted spikes, unlike most of the other Impulse coasters which only feature 1. Wicked Twister is one of the coasters which was closed during our visit in 2020, so I was very happy to finally get on it in 2021. It's very much like Possessed at Dorney Park, which I'm also a big fan of. Wicked Twister's launches are insanely forceful, and those twisted spikes give some crazy hang time and are so much fun falling back down. The only downside to Wicked Twister is that its back and forth nature, being a shuttle coaster, makes the ride a bit repetitive. And if you couldn't tell already, there's some serious competition on this list, so that's why Wicked Twister is unfortunately ranked so low despite its intense and fun ride experience. Wicked Twister still gets a score of 7 out of 10, which for most parks would easily land it inside the top 10, but that just goes to show you how good Cedar Point's lineup really is. However, since recording this video, it's been announced by Cedar Point that Wicked Twister will be closing in September, so hurry up and get your final rides on Wicked Twister before it bites the dust. Number 11, Rougarou, built by Bolliger and Mabiard in 1996.
I am Rougarou.
No, you're not.
Rougarou.
He's never existed because that's a made-up, dumb fairy tale name, you
Originally a stand-up coaster called Mantis, Rougarou was born in 2015 when Cedar Point converted it into a floorless coaster. Floorless coasters are much more popular for their comfortable ride experience compared to stand-up coasters, hence why the change was made. Rougarou gets a bad rep in the coaster community, and I'm not really sure why. My expectations of this coaster were blown out of the water when we finally rode it in 2021. I thought it was going to be a rough, boring ride based on the poor opinions I had heard, but Rougarou ended up being a crazy fun, intense, and whippy floorless coaster. Its layout is much like Green Lantern at Six Flags Great Adventure, but instead of those stand-up trains smashing your groin and turning your legs into jelly,
it's frightening. Turns the legs to jelly.
Rougarou's sit-down floorless trains are pain-free, and it ended up being one of my favorite floorless coasters, as I have it ranked higher than Hydra at Dorney Park. In the back row, Rougarou actually gives a tiny bit of airtime on the first drop, and the vertical loop offers some hang time. And from there on, all the inversions and whippy transitions will have you flying around your seat. I don't really have any negative opinions about Rougarou, other than it's a shame that it's at Cedar Point, because it would be a top-tier coaster at just about any other park. But here it gets absolutely buried, and doesn't even make the top 10. Rougarou gets another 7 out of 10, and I can't wait to try this again whenever I return to the point. And now we've made it to the top 10. Number 10, Blue Streak, built by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters in 1964. Located towards the front of the park, Blue Streak is Cedar Point's only wooden coaster. It doesn't look like much, but it certainly packs a punch. The front row provides a lot of great pops of ejector airtime, while being pretty darn smooth for its age. Yeah, the PTC trains aren't the best, but besides the turnaround, I couldn't really find a dead spot on this ride. My only complaint with Blue Streak is that it doesn't have the best operations, but other than that, the ride layout itself is great. Blue Streak was another one of the credits that we missed in 2020, so it was a pleasure to finally try it out in 2021. PTC's simple yet effective out-and-back layout is tried and true, and Blue Streak is up there as one of the company's better creations. Blue Streak earns a 7.5 out of 10 for being a fun and forceful wooden coaster for parkgoers big and small. Number 9, Valraven, built by Bolliger and Mabiard in 2016. It feels like a crime putting this monster of a dive coaster this low, yet here we are with Valraven just barely making it in the top 10. Don't get me wrong, Valraven is a very fun and intimidating dive coaster, but once again, it just goes to show you how good the coasters at Cedar Point really are. You gotta love the holding brake at the top of dive coasters, which suspends riders at the very top just for a few seconds before plummeting them down straight towards the earth. Valraven certainly delivers on this first drop, and much more, but gets a bad rep for being forceless due to its vest restraints. While the vests do constrict you more than the classic B&M over-the-shoulder restraint, I still didn't mind them too much. I'll still take dive coasters like SheiKra over Valraven. I would argue that Valraven has a more complete layout than other dive coasters, by throwing in a few extra elements that SheiKra doesn't have. Valraven is yet another coaster at the point which would be much better served at another park. Even though Valraven towers over its neighboring B&Ms, it is still very much overshadowed by all of the other thrill machines of the roller coaster. Nevertheless, Valraven gets an 8.5 out of 10 in my book for its menacing first drop and large swooping elements. Number 8, Gemini, built by Aerodynamics in 1978. Is it a mine train? Is it a hybrid? Is it a dueling coaster? Well, RCDB lists Gemini as a twin hybrid coaster, but to me, it's a mine train on steroids. Gemini is everything I wish Aero mine trains were, smooth airtime machines. Even though Gemini seems to be on the chopping block at Cedar Point, it's still an incredibly fun ride. I didn't expect much going in, but I was thoroughly surprised by the strong airtime it gives with little to no painful transitions. It definitely didn't race as well as I would have hoped, but it still gave some nice interactions here and there. From the outside looking in, Gemini looks like an old, rough, boring coaster, but it truly delivers smooth negative G-forces. Yes, there are a few moments of meandering on those turnarounds, but the fun I had on this ride well outweighed the dead spots. I give Gemini another 8.5 out of 10, and it'll definitely be a sad day when it ultimately bites the dust. Number 7. Raptor. Built by Bolliger and Mabillard in 1994. Now, I know that a lot of you might think this is a low spot for Raptor on this list, and understandably so. I know a lot of people are very high on Raptor. While it's a solid inverted coaster, I still found a lot of the other B&M inverts to be superior. Furthermore, Raptor just felt like a drawn-out Batman clone to me, of which I'm not a huge fan of. They're all solid rides, but I'll still take the likes of Montu, Banshee, and Alpengeist well over Raptor and the Batman clones. Okay, now that I'm done hating on Raptor, let's give it some love. As all B&M inverts do, Raptor delivers on positive G-forces, snappy transitions, and many inversions. The first few elements are really good, from the first drop to the 0G roll, but I'm not a huge fan of the Cobra roll, which gave mild headbanging. After that is a bit of a dead section with the turnaround into the mid-course brakes. Out of that mid-course, you do pick up some good speed as you're racing back towards the station and hit another couple of very snappy inversions. Finally, the ride caps off with probably the most intense helix I've ever experienced on an invert, if not any B&M period. So that's definitely one of the highlights of the ride. Because of this very solid layout, I still give Raptor an 8.5 out of 10. Apologies to all the Raptor fanboys out there, but I've got another B&M ranked higher than this. Number 6. Gatekeeper, built by Bolliger and Mabillard in 2013. Now, I know that this is an unpopular opinion, having Gatekeeper over Raptor, and maybe it's because Gatekeeper is still the only B&M wing coaster I've ever ridden. For comparison, I've been on almost 15 B&M inverted coasters, so Gatekeeper is very unique compared to those.
She is very gorgeous to me!
It's difficult to properly review Gatekeeper because not only is it hard to process the ride throughout, but each row and each side of the train gives such different experiences, but I'll do my best. Gatekeeper is a crazy, fun, underrated ride. Both times I've ridden Gatekeeper, I sat towards the back, which gives a really intense and forceful ride. That inverting first drop is unlike anything I've ever experienced, as you flip over yourself and go the opposite direction you would have thought. From there, you go into a huge swooping Immelman and rapidly transition into an airtime hill, which doesn't give that much airtime, but does give a nice break from flipping all over yourself. Then there's a large corkscrew, which goes directly into the signature element of the ride, a 0G roll which delicately threads through a pair of keyhole structures. This part of the ride is a crazy near-miss element, which gives some great head chopper. These structures also double as the park's entrance, hence the name Gatekeeper. Then the ride turns around with another inversion and heads back toward the station while interacting with the keyhole structures during an inline twist. After that, the ride patters off a bit with a mini helix of sorts and a hill into the brake run. Besides that section, the ride hauls through its layout. And like I said earlier, Gatekeeper is the only wing coaster I've ridden, so it's super unique to me, as opposed to Raptor, which is not very unique at all. I can see why people aren't the biggest fans of Gatekeeper, because the vest restraints do get a little tight, but same with Valraven, they don't bother me very much. All in all, Gatekeeper gets a score of 9 out of 10 for being a thoroughly fun, huge wing coaster that pulls you like a rag doll through its course. Capping off the top 5 at Cedar Point is number 5, Magnum XL200, built by Aerodynamics in 1989.
I dropped my monster condom that I used for my Magnum Dom.
Looking for airtime? So much airtime that it hurts? Well, look no further than the first ever full-circuit hypercoaster. In 2020, I rode this in the back row, which certainly had strong airtime, but its age definitely showed throughout the ride. The airtime is aggressive, and the pain is noticeable, but make no mistake, Magnum XL200 is a crazy ride. Yes, it feels a bit outdated with its janky aero transitions, but in case you forgot, this ride makes up for it in airtime, by violently throwing you out of your seat numerous times throughout the ride. As most hypers do, Magnum features airtime hill after airtime hill. The transitions in and out of the turnaround are a bit painful, but has a unique turnaround halfway through the ride, which I enjoyed. But the element as a whole pulls a lot of great positive forces. Magnum also features 3 tunnels throughout the ride, 2 of which are on the return trip. Many, including myself, would probably consider the return trip to be the best part of the ride. I will say that the shape of these hills is not the best, since they're pretty much triangular, but they still provide a lot of really fun, aggressive negative G-forces. I haven't tried Magnum in the so-called magic seat yet, aka row 3, but next time I'm at Cedar Point, I'll certainly try it out. As I've mentioned, the downside of this ride is the painful transitions and overall old feel, but I would still give it a solid 9 out of 10 because it is still a very thrilling and authentic hypercoaster. We've now made it to the elite category. The next 4 coasters are all in my top 25 overall, and are all legendary rides. Most people can agree that these are the top 4 coasters at Cedar Point, but where do they rank? Let's find out. Number 4, Top Thrill Dragster, built by Intamin in 2003. Just when you thought that coasters couldn't get any crazier, Cedar Point shocks the world and builds this masterpiece in 2003. Thank God I finally got a few rides on the first 400-foot tall coaster, otherwise known as a strata coaster. This was the most notable closed ride during our visit in 2020, but I'll tell you what, it was well worth the wait. Top Thrill Dragster was easily one of the most thrilling coasters I've ridden. Fitting name. All puns aside, Top Thrill Dragster has a sister coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure we all know and some love called King Ka. All I can say is, even though these should be virtually the same ride, Top Thrill Dragster is just exponentially better than King Ka. Not only are the restraints on Top Thrill so much better, but the ride itself is so much smoother and so much more comfortable than Ka. Top Thrill Dragster has very minimalistic T-shaped lap bars, which allow you to freely experience shooting off at 120 miles per hour, climbing 420 feet in the air, and plummeting back down another 400 feet. Meanwhile, King Ka's hard over-the-shoulder restraints put your head into a blender. King Ka's taller stature and worse maintenance has also caused the ride to be significantly rougher the further back you sit. Meanwhile, Top Thrill Dragster is perfectly enjoyable both front and back. With that being said, it's no wonder why Top Thrill Dragster is elite. I was quite literally celebrating when I rode Top Thrill Dragster for the first time in 2021, because it was easily one of the best rides on any coaster I've ever had. That launch is just absurdly fun and scary, which just adds to the fun. Also, there's nothing quite like seeing an entire peninsula covered in roller coasters from 420 feet in the air, because the view from the peak of the top hat is truly spectacular. Couple all that with a smooth ride and liberating restraints, and you have one of Cedar Point's most iconic roller coasters. Top Thrill Dragster proudly scores a 9.5 out of 10, with the only possible flaw being that it's a short ride experience, but I still have it in my top 25 coasters. Gotta love the thrill that is Top Thrill Dragster. Now on to the top 3. My third favorite coaster at Cedar Point is number 3, Millennium Force, built by Intamin in 2000. At the turn of the millennium, there was a force, a driving force convincing parks that they needed to go bigger, taller, faster. This was the era of the Coaster Wars, and one of the shining achievements of that time period was Millennium Force. The first ever full-circuit Giga coaster, or coaster over 300 feet, but under 400 feet, was also my first ever Giga. I feel bad putting this over Dragster, because it's so hard to choose a favorite, but Millennium Force, or let's just go with Millie for short,
In New York, I'm Millie Rock.
gets a slight edge for being a more complete ride experience. The only way to experience Millennium Force, in my opinion, is in the front row. I got to try it in the back row in 2021, and it wasn't nearly as good as in the front. As I said in my Cedar Point Park review, riding Millie quite literally feels like being a cartoon character riding a roller coaster. That's because of the intense positive G's and high speed. Millie tops out at 93 miles per hour, and that speed is pretty well maintained throughout the ride. I also found Millennium Force's hills to provide some pretty good airtime as well, even though the ride focuses on intense overbank turns. I probably mentioned this already in the park review, but one of the coolest parts of this ride is actually the lift hill. Every time I ride it, I think back to the days when I first started getting into roller coasters and watching POVs of Millennium Force, thinking, oh my god, I'm never going to ride that. So every time I have ridden Millie, I'm proud that I've finally conquered my fears and can now enjoy the incredible views of Lake Erie as Millennium Force towers right along the shoreline. But let's not forget about that first drop. It literally feels like you're a meteor shooting towards the Earth's surface. No matter what row you're sitting in, you get crazy good airtime, as well as bone-crushing positive G's when you bottom out and rise back up into the ride's first overbank curve. For time's sake, and because there's a lot of repeated elements, I won't go into a full ride review. I will say though, that even though a lot of the elements are similar, they are done tremendously well, and I don't think that there's much that I would change about Millennium Force, if anything at all. Crazy tall, crazy fast, crazy intense, what more could you ask for? Millennium Force also scores a 9.5 out of 10, as it's one of the most unique and petrifying coasters I've ever ridden. Finally, we've come to the top 2 coasters at the Roller Coast. Which coaster earns the title of best at Cedar Point? Well, it's not. Number 2, Maverick, built by Intamin in 2007. What can I say about Maverick? Better yet, what can't I say about Maverick? Maverick is an absolutely bonkers launch coaster, which continues to blow me away every time I ride it. Front, back, middle, it doesn't matter where you sit on Maverick. You'll get a crazy, intense, whippy, and airtime-filled ride. Going into my first ride in 2020, I didn't have a lot of expectations going into Maverick, but I came off knowing that it was easily the best launch coaster I've ever ridden. Climb aboard this bucking bronco as your steed climbs an LSM-propelled launch lift hill. This lift/launch doesn't do a whole lot, but with the ejector-filled 95-degree beyond vertical drop after, the lift doesn't really need to do much. That first drop sends you flying out of your seat as you bottom out almost immediately. From there, the quick transitions and rapid elements are truly difficult to wrap your head around. After the first drop is a long turnaround, followed by 2 quick whips to the left and then the right. Next is one of the ride's best airtime moments with a large airtime hill. You then go into another turnaround and then the 2 inversions of the ride, a pair of corkscrews known as a twisted horseshoe roll, which provide great whip and laterals. Now you've reached the halfway point of the ride, as the train slows down into a dark and foreboding tunnel. Good luck trying to catch your breath, as this horse isn't done just yet. Soon, riders will then experience the ride at its top speed of 70 miles per hour, as Maverick shoots out of the tunnel to the left into a trimmed hill, a turnaround, a transition over the water, and then one of the best elements of the ride, the first of 2 Stengel dives. The first Stengel dive not only provides a little bit of a dueling element with another train going over the lift hill, but it also gives one of the crazy experiences a coaster element can possibly give. Both sustained ejector airtime coupled with extreme lateral forces. Your body is thrown in ways in which you can't possibly imagine. Like I said, that's just the first of 2 Stengel dives, as the second one is even stronger than the first. These Stengel dives are definitely some of my favorite elements of all time, and I always look forward to them the most when riding Maverick. The last element of the ride is one more quick pop of airtime with a speed hill, as the ride concludes by turning to the right into the brake run. Like I said earlier, Maverick is easily my favorite launch coaster. The amount of forces you feel in every direction is just nuts, and I still can't believe that this thing exists. It amazes me that Maverick isn't the best in its park, because just about anywhere else, it would be. Maverick scores a perfect 10 out of 10 for its wild airtime, unbelievable laterals, and overall nuts layout. It's my favorite launch coaster out there, and it's not even close. Yet somehow, one coaster still tops this list, and that's number 1, Steel Vengeance, built by Rocky Mountain Construction in 2018. It's no surprise that my favorite coaster of all time, and RMC's crown jewel, takes the cake at Cedar Point. It's an impressive feat, so just how did Steel Vengeance accomplish this? Well, it did it with the most airtime-filled, action-packed, well-rounded layout of any coaster at Cedar Point, and arguably the world. As of right now, Steel Vengeance, along with Zadra at Energylandia, are the only 2 hyper-hybrid coasters operating in the world. That is until Iron Gwazi opens. This was RMC's first crack at a coaster over 200 feet tall, and who better to build it for than Cedar Point? Boy oh boy did everyone involved knock this project out of the park. Climb the 205-foot tall lift hill and plummet face first down Steel Vengeance's 90-degree 200-foot drop. No matter what row you're sitting in, this first drop will give some of the most powerful sustained ejector airtime out there. Hopefully from the beginning, you're experiencing this coaster in the back row, because there's no better way to feel its bounty of airtime than in the back. Since Steel Vengeance is kind of a long name, let's just go with Steve for short, but the name Steve will be the only short thing about this ride. After you bottom out from the first drop, get ready to fly over a small speed hill, followed by another sustained airtime moment over the ride's first large hill. The next moment on this ride is considered by many to be its best, and that's the heavenly outward banked hill. Not only is this one of the more photogenic elements of the ride, it's also iconic for its incredible negative forces, giving you the best airtime you may ever experience. The outward banked hill sends you up and out of your seat, all while going sideways. Personally, this is my favorite moment of the ride, and possibly my favorite element ever, period. RMC has perfected the art of sideways airtime, and nowhere is that more evident than on Steel Vengeance. After the signature outward banked hill, you hit another small airtime hill, and then a pair of twisted inversions which intertwine underneath the ride's lift structure. After turning riders up, down, and all around themselves, Steel Vengeance hits another pair of airtime hills before taking a brief pause on the mid-course brakes. This brake run, however, hardly slows the train down, as you swoop back down towards the earth with another jolt of airtime, followed by a double-up filled with ejector. I think you can guess where it goes from here. Oh wait, you can't, as Steel Vengeance goes into another smaller outward banked hill, a banked curve, and yet another zero-G roll. From there, Steel Vengeance's non-stop airtime hill, banked curve, one more inversion for good measure. Hill, airtime, ejector. You get the picture. All while weaving in and out of its incredible support structure. This thing really is a maze of wood and steel, because after your first ride, you'll wonder how you even made it out of that maze alive. In case you couldn't tell, I'm a big fan of Steel Vengeance. And yeah, that might just make me like everyone else, but there's a reason why so many people consider this to be the greatest roller coaster on Earth, or at least the roller coast. Steel Vengeance is perfect in every sense of the word, a no-brainer 10 out of 10. And without a doubt, the #1 coaster at Cedar Point. And that's all 17 coasters of Cedar Point ranked. Did you agree with the list? Leave a comment down below to let everyone know what your top 10, top 5, or #1 coaster is at the roller coast. How was the ranking? Was it spot on, or was it way off? Let me hear all your thoughts in the comments below. As always, leave a thumbs up on the video if you want to see more lists like this in the future. And just so you don't miss out on those future lists, hit that subscribe button and notification bell too. I seriously can't wait to get back to Cedar Point, because it truly is a place like no other. But until then, and until the next video, this has been Coaster Jawn, ride on.